going to be there were some very interesting scenarios sent to me this time, and so I think you'll find them very interesting and entertaining, and it makes it a lot more fun when people are texting in. So we'll get moving along here. I'm going to start off. I have degrees, as it was announced by Bob, in geology and geophysics. I do not have a degree in philosophy, and you may say, well, why are you even saying that? Well, ethics falls under philosophy. If you were to be a philosophy major at a university, you would be studying ethics. I learned that under this, doing this talk. And I don't have a degree in jurisprudence, which means I'm not an attorney. Okay, and that means I am not qualified to give legal advice. I do give some advice in here, but I don't think any lawyer would complain with what I have to say. And when I say Google University, that means I've spent a lot of time on the internet reading and reading. It's amazing the amount of stuff that you can read about ethics on the internet without even having to start with the newspaper. So, and then again, I am the past president of the Houston Geologic Society. So why ethics training? Well, of course, it's an employment requirement for some. Professional license societies, I think a lot of people are here because of that. Personal development. This is a little cartoon. I enjoy this. This Dilbert is one of my favorites because amazingly, all of these things that he talks about happened. I don't know where he worked, but I must have worked there too at one point in time. So, yes, there's Dilbert. I love it with the pointy-haired boss. And then the point up here is that the point of the presentation is to make you aware of many of the ethics issues you'll encounter in the workplace. Oh, and I have my laser pointer here, so hopefully that will help along the way. This is my good buddy, David Curtis. He's the director of the AAPG. And even David understands how we conduct ourselves, how we conduct our business really does matter. So that was from February of last year. I didn't change this slide, but I could have easily changed this slide. It's a complicated slide to make, and I enjoyed it a great deal. But these are pretty old. This is Kelly Conway. It's not very ethical to say that. And then you had this guy here. He was doing all kinds of illegal money stuff and money laundering of campaign contributions and stuff and lobbying. And he, rather than face going to prison, killed himself. Good grief. And then you had this guy. We all remember Mr. Flynn, who had to resign as a national security advisor and finally did a plea bargain the other day, and he's still in the news. And then, gosh, Trish, you know this guy. I got a lot of friends from Calgary who send me emails every day about this guy. They really don't care for him, and he has done a lot of craziness. But this is one of them here. Cash for access. Not very good. And then this was another one, a BLM official sold out concert tickets to the Burning Man festival. Holy cow, got that as a gift from somebody. Not supposed to do that. This guy here, district attorney in Philadelphia, fined $62,000 for ethics violations. And then last but not least, this is a guy in Seattle, same thing. And this was, he got a lot of tickets to go to sporting event tickets. Gosh, I don't know about you guys, but if you've been to the Rockets lately, it's not cheap. So those things do fall into that category. So let's define ethics here. This is out of Webster's dictionary. System of moral principles. Here are some rules of conduct. Moral principles of an individual, his ethics forbid betrayal of confidence. And then this last one here, a branch of philosophy dealing with, this is the one we spent a lot of time talking about in the past on the philosophy of ethics. And but there's more to it. You know, some people want to know what is the difference between ethics and morals, and really the bottom line is that morals are your individual own principles regarding right and wrong, whereas ethics are related to an external source. For example, at work, when I worked at Anadarko, we had a code of conduct for workplace principles and what we would do. And then we had also principles of religion as an ethics issue in there too. So here it is broken out a little bit more. Rules of conduct versus principles or habits with respect to right and wrong. The social system, or it's an external set of rules that you live by versus individual internal. And then why do we do it? Because society says it's the right thing to do under ethics, and because we believe something to be right or wrong is why we do it under morals. So that's how these two are related. They're related but not the same exactly. Here's kind of where we ended up last couple of years. I had this little model here, and I didn't part it down here, but I did heist this from some Harvard Business School papers that I read. They were using this as a way of making ethical or consistent decisions as a manager at a company, okay? And I think kind of the take-home thing, you had theology-based and dentology. I can't pronounce that very well. Up here up at the top, which is ego is I do everything for myself. Utilitarianism is we do everything for the good of the tribe. You go over here to the needs-based, I guess it's called duty and obligation. Existentialism is that it's your duty, you are the leader, it's your duty to do it. And contractarianism is that there's a set of moral contract that you have with people, and that was kind of the basic part of it. And then in the middle here we had divine command theory, which is God has said it is the right thing to do. I guess you would put the 10 Commandments in that one. And then you have down here on the lower part, you had Sedgwick's dualism, where he tried to bring this together where you could be in it for yourself, but you still had the ability to choose something that was not good for you, but for the betterment of the tribe. And then you had over here with Kant's ethics, is that versus I am the leader and having a moral contract, that Kant's ethics was you do things because you ought to do them. It's a little more involved in that, but that's the basic idea. And then we have intuitionism and love ethic. Intuitionism is that you do it because intuitively you know it's the right thing to do. That's kind of where that goes to. And the love ethic is you do it because out of the love for other people in the human race. My personal opinion is you wanted to be sticking around down here in the bottom part of this thing because it gave you a little more flexibility. But that's kind of where we got to. We're going to go over, and the point of it was the model allowed us to analyze and make decisions, help us determine if we were happy with that point of view, be consistent in our decision making. Oh, what did I do? How did I do that? Okay, here we go. And see the full spectrum of possible paths that we could take in any decision. And then we come over here. I keep this one in here. I think this will be here forever because for those of you that know my wife and know me, this is just so us, except for I'm a little taller than her. But this is just so us. I love this. This is my favorite slide in the whole show because it's like, get serious, John. We're talking business ethics, not just ethics. Okay, so yes, let's get to it. What is it? Boy, my slide thing keeps jumping fast. Some people believe it's Niccolo Machiavelli. Anybody know who he is? Yeah. Anybody read The Prince? I read it because I wanted to know if I ran into this guy. But basically, he wrote this in like the, I don't know, 1500s or something like that for Lorenzo Medici, who claimed he never read it. And if you've read it, you understand why he says that. But the bottom line is that a prince wishing to hold his own needs to know how to do wrong, and I kind of dumbed it down to meaning any means to an end. To keep power, basically, is where we're at. But modern day business ethics can be broken down into two categories. Legal and illegal, okay? Really it is. It comes right down to it. If I kind of looked at a lot of things, and that really is what it is. And under illegal, Oh, unethical, illegal behavior. I need to read my own thing here. It's harder to see on the angle. Is like bribes, kickback schemes, payoffs, or known as corruption. Unethical, legal behavior, taking credit for others' work, withholding data from your business associates. Good way to get ahead of your buddy next door is to make sure he doesn't get all the stuff in the well file. Backstabbing your business associates, saying bad things about the people you work with to your boss. I call that playground behavior. I think it's pretty fitting. You know, when you think about it, all of the people on the playground, the bully, the thief, the whole group, they're all still out there. You just see them in a grown-up sense. So most of you know that my father is my greatest hero, and he was a very smart man. And at the end of the day, that guy's been dead for more than 15 years, and he gets smarter every day I am alive. I should listen to more of the things he told me. I learned that every day. But here's one of the things he told me. I was getting in my car with Dawn, moving to start a job, and before we got in the car to move to California to work for Chevron, he told me this. He goes, you know, of course, your career, you'll see people engage in activities you will know are wrong or illegal. They're going to rationalize their actions in a multitude of different ways, and when it comes to the end, and the curtain falls, they'll be standing out in the open with no one by their side. And the main one in here, did I leave it out here? Oh, and the curtain falls, and it always falls. I think somewhere they got left out of here. But the bottom line is that they think that they can do this hiding behind a curtain like the Wizard of Oz, but at the end of the day, the curtain always falls and they're out there standing by themselves, and you never want to be that person. The only thing you have, you know, he said, you think you got a lot, John? You think you got these 2 big degrees that you got out there at Wright State and that? He says, that isn't what you have. All you have is your reputation. And he says, it takes you years. You're starting out, it takes you years to build a reputation. And it takes, I think he did use the word seconds, but I've moved it to minutes to destroy it. But with Facebook, I guess you could do it in seconds at this point. He was very firm about this. He was a government engineer, and I think he'd seen a lot of bad stuff. And then he added this thing for me. In Ohio, convicts have horizontal stripes. And it says here, it's best to keep your pin stripes vertical, never horizontal, which is, you know, don't end up in jail. Thank you, Dad. That was smart advice. So this is where ethics must start, Scott's story. I like this story a great deal. Scott and I were buddies growing up. He was one of the smartest people I've ever met. I went to undergraduate school with Scott at Wright State, and he was an engineer, and we took many classes together. But we kind of split off from that point, and later in life, I decided to reconnect with Scott. And so when I started hunting him down on the internet, I found that he was a college professor at a university in Illinois, which didn't surprise me in the least. He was very, very smart. And so I hooked up with Scott. I had him come down here for the rodeo, and I was telling him about some of my experiences where I had gone to a school, and I'd taken this math class, and he goes, "Oh, I teach that. That's one of the classes I teach. It's called Engineering Mathematics. It's a tricky little devil of a class." And I said, yes, I got really mad one time. This professor just almost flat out accused me of cheating. And I was like, good grief, you know. And he looked at me, he goes, "Oh, cheating is rampant." I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, I said, I saw no value. I said, to me, I saw no value in cheating because when I get in the work world, people are going to know I don't know it. So there's no value in it to me. He goes, "Oh, they're not cheating to pass the class, John. They're cheating to get an A." I said, "What?" And he goes, "Yes." I said, I looked at him, I said, "Scott, you don't have a cheating problem at your school. You have an ethics issue, and you need to institute an ethics course about the ethics of cheating, because if you start cheating in school and that, it's not a hard leap to doing it when you get into the working world." So this is a photograph taken by my my little protege there at Anadarko, Miss Miley, and she likes to take lots of photographs, and so I get them from her. This is from La Popa, Mexico. I think you always need a little bit of a break as we're going along with this material. This is where the salt weld thing was out by Monterey, but I've titled this, Seeing the Impact of Your Decisions Clearly. So, corruption is alive and well in the world. Take a look at this. This is from The Economist. This is from The Economist. And you can see that the warmer the colors, the worse the situation is. I mean, the worst places in the world is Somalia, which it doesn't really fit my my narrative I'm going to have here in a minute, because they're just pirates and warlords. But the narrative I have is that from the worst place in the world going up, it is mainly oil or mineral extraction places. Look, Venezuela, Brazil, Mexico, Libya, Sudan, right, Chad, Yemen, well, Afghanistan isn't, and Turkmenistan has a little bit, but you have Iran, you have Iraq. I mean, they're all in here, and there's no, it's no joke that is where it's at, and I do have a hard time. Golly, what do I keep? Oh, sorry about that. Here we are. I do have a hard time when people look at me and I complain about the goal here is to avoid corruption in our professional societies and things like that. But you can really see it. And the bottom line is, it actually happens here too, in this one that's blue. It doesn't get called corruption, but that's because we have a different name for it here. We call it white-collar crime. So it doesn't really get under the name of corruption, but it really is. It's exactly the same stuff. So the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development in 2014 did a report on what had been happening since the passage of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act and the Bribery Act. And these are the observations they made. 60% of all bribery cases occur in these four business sections. Look at that, resource extraction. Construction, oh hey, we do that too. Transportation and storage, we do that too. Boom. So there's a reason that it's falling in the oil and gas sector. There's a lot of money in that sector, and there's a lot of things that go on, and that's where it can happen. 53%, this is a little scary to me. 53% involves management, 41% of it's management, and 12% are CEOs. That's a little scary. 75% of all cases use an intermediary or a foreign agent to take care of, to do the dirty work. And 20% results in prison time, 61% fines against individuals and companies. This is a big time deal. Laws against corruption in the United States of America. 1977, we passed the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. How many people are familiar with this? If you've worked internationally, you're familiar with it. In the United Kingdom in 2010, they passed the Bribery Act of 2010. Anybody familiar with that one? Well, you will be when we're done. Which law is more stringent? The Foreign Corrupt Practices Act of 1977 or the Bribery Law of 2010? Just make a guess. Text that in there. This helps use some of our, oh good, I got it on percentages. That way we won't have to see, you know, the number of people who actually text in. Anybody else going to, yeah. Yep. Would anybody like to comment? I mean, right now, we have 82% of the people telling us it's the Bribery Law of 2010, and it is true. That is just the more stringent of the two. Let's ask this question. Who is bound by these laws? Citizens of the country where the law exists, anyone connected to business in the US or the UK? going to need to slow down, guys. Yes?
John, I think also for green card holders in the U.S.
Right, okay, it would probably be that too. If you're tied to the country, yeah. I'm trying to slow us down a little bit. I'm shooting through this a little quick. But here we go. The people that are bound by it is anyone with a business connection in the U.S. or the U.K. are bound by these two laws. So if you work for a Fortune 500 company, then they have a listing on the UK stock exchange. If you can trade their shares over there, you're bound by the bribery law of 2010. Or if you have any kind of thing like that. Or if you're a British citizen, you're bound by it. So this, I think, is a really important one here. And a lot of times, well, let's just ask the question here. Text on in here and tell me what you think. Is it the perception that corruption could happen and occur as bad as, yes. So we have one person that said yes. But let's see what everybody else says. Well, here we have it. The crowd believes that the perception is as bad as actually doing the act, and I agree with that. I think that is actually true, and it is always surprising to me when I'm reading the newspaper and local politicians in this country. See, that seems to have shot right over their head. You know, they may or may not have done something, whatever, and but it's the fact that they allowed themselves to get into a situation where this perception exists that it could have happened, and then they try to cover that up, and then as soon as they try to cover it up, that's when they break the law. But yes, it is perception, and it's perception on a lot of different things. It doesn't matter whether you've taken a bribe or done something like that, or even with sexual harassment, which is also an ethics issue on most of these things. It is the perception. It is not your idea of what happened, but it is a perception that the public gets when they look at what actually transpired. So here we go. I guess can you guys read that at all? Gosh, it's not very, never bright, not very good. I'm sorry about that, but it's so complicated. But at the end of the day, I'm gonna read it to you a little bit here. That it's unlawful. What?
That's the fine print.
Yeah, it's the fine print. It's fine print all the way through here because this thing is huge. But if you are an issuer of a class of securities registered or pursuant to whatever that requires to file reports to the SEC of this for any officer, director, employee, agent, or such issuer of stock acting on behalf of that issuer to make use of mail, like the U.S. mail or any mail, as a means of instrument for interstate commerce corruptly and offer a payment, promise to pay, authorize of payment of any money or offer or gift, promise to give or authorize of giving of anything of value to any foreign official for purposes of influencing decisions such as foreign officials' duty capacity or anything like that, to get them to, is an unlawful act. Okay? And you can induce foreign officials to use their influence or instrumentally affect the influence of that using money. It's against the law. Okay, I know that doesn't seem surprising, but you know, bribery in the United States and in the UK is illegal, but if you go to other cultures around the world, this is how it works. One of the things that does surprise me in that picture on the corruption is how far up the scale Nigeria falls. Holy cow, last time I was in Nigeria, you have to pay the guy. It's so corrupt, you have to pay the guy to get out of the darn country. If you don't have a gift for the guy that's letting you go through when he's looking at your stuff, you can't even get on the plane. That is how corrupt things are in that country. And they call it pure capitalism, but I'm not there. But it's a cultural difference, and they don't see it as corruption. And so those are things that you need to be aware of.
Over there, they call them tips.
Right. Right.
Facilitation.
Well, I understand that. We're going to get down here. Facilitation payment. Okay, we'll get right down here to that one, John. That's right down here. Exception to the routine is facilitation payment. And yes, John, you work in seismic, so you understand how some of these things work. But at this point, that has become a no-no, and that is because of the Bribery Act of 2010, and that is a reason that it's much more stringent than the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. You're not allowed to make facilitation payments, which is basically called greasing the skids. You're paying someone to perform a duty that they were going to perform anyways, but to do it in a more timely fashion, I guess is the way I always looked at it. And the oil and gas industry used a lot of facility payments because you were bringing in materials from overseas and into these countries. You're having to go through customs and that. A lot of that was going on, and that has come to an end. And then there was also, well, we'll see here in a minute. Let's just keep on going. The last one here is, I guess, I don't know. This is pretty involved. If you really want to read it, you need to read it yourself where you can actually see it. We're going to move on to the Bribery Act of 2010. Okay, and it's hard to read that. Is it out of focus or something? The categories are general bribery offenses, bribery of foreign officials, failure for a commercial organization to prevent bribery, and the last one is prosecution and penalties. And you can see there's a lot here. It basically says that you can't give anybody any money to influence any decision that's a foreign official. And then they talk about that. The top part is different things that you can do, and even something as simple as, well, the minister of energy in country XYZ, their son would like to go to a Western university. Can you sponsor them to go, or whatever? You cannot do that. That is against the law under the Bribery Act of 2010 and Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. You just can't do those kind of things. So it's even as low as that. You have to be really careful. One of the things that we used to talk about at Anadarko is that you can give a gift if it can be received in like kind. Okay? So for example, if John over at TGS was to take me out to dinner, I can accept that. But the flip side of that is that at some point in the future, I need to either buy him a beer or take him out to dinner. And that's the flip side of it. And that was one of the things that they always pointed out. And I can't tell you about the number of times that I ran into people that played more golf than I'd ever seen in my life and never paid a green fee. The company came down on them. You can't do that. So here we are, failure of a commercial organization to prevent bribery. It is also, if you are an employee at a company, it is your job and the company's job to prevent bribery. So if you see it, you need to prevent it, and not preventing it is also a crime. And so they have some guidelines about that. And then this is the prosecution thing down here. But let's just go over some recent examples. Probably the most entertaining part of this job, being the ethics lecture, is reading the newspaper, which I love to do with my wife, and we circle every week. Every week we're circling articles. These are just the ones we've seen since the first of the year, okay? Oh, sorry about that. Gosh, that glide plane is right there. So here we go. Harvest Natural Resources. I actually know these guys. They attended Scout Check with me. They're a nice group of guys. I had no idea the problems that were going on for them. Harvest Resource, just the other day, is suing PDVSA in federal court here in Houston for seeking close to $500 million in damages as a result of PDVSA demanding millions in bribes to approve their Venezuelan asset sales. Basically, they have been trying to sell their assets, and they have found buyers multiple times, and those buyers say, okay, yes, we'll buy it for you for this price, and then they go to get this to get this asset sale approved by the Venezuelans, who say, will the Minister of Natural Resources says, I will approve it if you give me $10 million. And it's like, we can't do that, buddy, because it's against the law. And so they did finally sell their property, but they experienced a loss from the first offer they had that was rejected because they couldn't pay the bribe of $500 million. There you go. So I hope that they can get that money out of the Venezuelans. They have a lot of assets here in the country. Citgo gasoline is the Venezuelans. The Brazil scandal. This one's come near and dear to my heart. I worked Brazil for many years, and so President Lula. This guy. One time was the most popular politician in the world. Guy's got a third-grade education, but the things that I've been reading lately, he's looking at 12 years of prison for accepting bribes for lucrative government contracts. It was described that he was running the country almost like a cartel during his time there. I remember some of these companies, there was a lot of discussion when I worked at Kerr-McGee about whether we should get in company with Odebrecht, and there was some question about how the heck they were getting some of the contracts and assets that they had, and it was decided that we couldn't take that kind of risk to work with those guys. And they are one of the core groups that are in this scandal. So these are things where people at the company are all the time keeping an eye out for it, and you need to be keeping an eye out yourself. Lula is working right now to try and stay out of jail by running for president again. He has realized that if he is president, you can't get thrown in jail because that's against the law. And now they're coming out and saying that they're going to convict him before the election. And so if you've been convicted of corruption, you can't run for office. So he's trying everything he can to stay out of jail, but I think it's too late for him. And I'm thinking Delma's going with him because she was right in there. So the Nigerian scandal, this is another one. This is just the other day in the newspaper. Top executives at Royal Dutch Shell and E&I face bribery charges in Milan, which is surprising to me because I always thought that the Italians and the French were some of the worst for paying bribes around the world, but quite clearly in the Dutch, well, they did it a lot is what I was told. But, you know, here they are, the Italians are charging them with this, and they reportedly paid $1.1 billion to access lucrative offshore Nigerian oil field. And this is at the CEO level. So, yeah, it's pretty scary. And then this is the next one. This one I don't know as much about, but it showed up when I was going through the internet. Huffington Post reported on them, and they were some of it was in the newspaper just last week. And in this case here, Una Oil was a company located, I think they were in Monaco. And that's a small country between Italy and Spain and France there, or maybe between Italy and France, I guess is really where it is. And these guys had an office, and they were basically acting as foreign go-betweens to bribe companies. It's a whole litany of oil and gas companies that are involved in this. But what was in the newspaper, and I'm going to say good things for these guys, Core Lab was in this group, and just the other day, they were exonerated the first week of February from this scandal, but the fate for the other people is still yet to be determined. So, good job, Core Lab. You stayed out of trouble. Hopefully, you know, a lot of times these things never even go to court. They get settled out of court. Because companies think it's just quicker, faster to settle out of court than fight off people in court. So what to do if you find yourself in one of these situations? I thought about this a lot because I do not have a jurisprudence degree, so I can't give legal advice. But I think this is okay. If you work at a major corporation listed for one of the U.S. stock exchanges, read your company compliance policy on foreign corruption and follow it. If no policy exists, contact the company's senior legal counsel for guidance, and consider getting personal outside legal counsel. And the reason I say that is that so many of these things are happening at a very high level. You know, I've always been under the idea that you try to go to somebody who's high enough in the company that they're not involved in that. You're trapped if it's the CEO. So.
What usually happens, they don't get prosecuted. You as the underling, they give you the Timmy.
Yeah, I understand. But I really highly recommend, and I don't think there's a lawyer that would disagree with this, that you really need to seek legal guidance. And if you have your own company and a foreign official approaches you asking for a bribe, get immediate outside legal counsel, because you could have problems straight up. As one of the fine prints in both of these laws is that the person who asks for the bribe never goes to jail. That actually, it's crazy, is not considered illegal because they consider it to be part of the social culture of these countries. But it's illegal for you to give them anything, okay? So that's where the tricky part comes in. So this is another geology break. This is a place I would like to go to. Did you hear that, Dawn? This is the Dolomites in northern Italy. I would love to go there. I've never been there. I think it's quite pretty. But Monica's been there, and she took this picture for me. So there you go. Thank you. All right. Oh, we're doing great. White collar crime, oil and gas sector, fraud, cooking the books, lying on environmental compliance reports. I've tried to keep you guys in there, Trish. Lying on safety compliance reports. I've seen that. Insider trading, kickback schemes, overselling oil and gas deals that have no chance of making a discovery, use of stolen data, selling proprietary company information. I guess that goes in there with stolen data. Bribery. Okay, here we go. I'm going with the most famous one that I know of, which is Enron. And this one here, they were cooking the books and lying like crazy. And many of us who are here from Houston, there's probably people in this room that may have even worked for these guys. But they were considered the most innovative company in America for years, 6 years consecutive. But in 2001, they came crashing down, and the result, and that was the enactment of Sarbanes-Oxley in 2002 and the dissolution of Arthur Andersen accounting firm, which is, they were in on it too. So this was a big one. Revenues, and that was terrible. Here's another one here. So it's been going on a long time. This is from like the 30s. This happened here in East Texas. Dad Joyner, I don't know how many of you guys know him. My pointer's dying there a little bit, but that's him right there with the hat. He was a oil and gas deal seller, and he had a business model: pick an area with limited potential to find oil, sell more than 100% working interest. Drill a dry hole. Nobody will know the difference. Works well until you find the second largest oil field in the lower 48 prior to the shale play That was the East Texas field, found by random drilling. Dad Joyner found that, and it really made kind of made Hunt Oil what it was. They figured out early on that he'd oversold the deal and went around and picked up all those pieces of working interest because they recognized the potential there real quickly. But so it's been going on a long time. Oil and gas problems, these are things that can happen as an independent. Or if you're out there picking up deals, these are things that can happen to you. You got to be very aware of that. Examples of white-collar crime you might see as a regular employee. AFEs that you are responsible for. Overcharging on submitted vendor invoices. Invoices submitted for work not done. Unauthorized invoices showing up on your AFE. All of these can happen. You need to be alert and aware. Illegal use of seismic data and well data. That really makes John mad. I'm just going to tell you, it makes him very angry. Don't make John mad. You won't like that. He's got a very good legal team. I think this is the one that can happen the most out there. There are all kinds of licensing agreements associated with seismic data, particularly if it's being used here in the U.S., but even international seismic data. And you need to follow those licensing rules. And it's a big-time deal, a big-time deal. And well data, people, here in the U.S., if you're offshore, I don't even know how onshore works. Maybe you just have to trade for that data. I'm not quite sure. But offshore, you have a 2-year waiting period, and you can have people trying to sell hot wells on the street to people, sell that information because it's before the 2-year period. You can't get involved in that. That's not a good idea. You can run into a lot of problems. Being paid to sign off on others' work that you have not reviewed. This is really bad. Oop. Yes, sir.
Isn't that what happens with our congressmen?
Well, they have a staff that's supposed to be reading it. I don't want to go there, but yeah, you could say that. Okay, here's another geology break from Monica. This is the Ross Shelf. There's turbidites up there in those cliffs. I just don't have good resolution today. Sorry about that. But that's another nice picture. But I'm going to keep moving along because we're getting there. Playground behavior. Taking credit for others' work. Withholding data from your business associates. I think I talked about that a little bit. Backstabbing business associates. Not providing critical feedback when asked. In a nutshell, ethics are about this. Relationships. Struggling to develop a well-informed conscience. Being true to the idea who we are and what we stand for, having the courage to explore difficult questions, accepting the cost of doing what we think is right. I think that's the hardest one right there. Accepting the cost of what it is to do the right thing. That's a tough one, especially when it doesn't work well for you. Asking the simple question, what ought I do? So we're going to move on from there into some case studies. We're down to about 10 minutes left. 15 minutes. Do you think I should jump ahead to the new questions? Okay, because I thought they were a lot more interesting. Okay? And we can go back to the old ones, but I was submitted this set of questions about a week and a half ago with the person pleading with me, I hope it's not too late. And I was thinking, how can it be too late? I haven't even put this thing together yet. But these were some of the best questions and most thought-provoking questions I had seen. So the story, as you well see, 20 years ago, person employed at a large independent, generating prospects in Basin X. Company stopped exploring in that basin shortly after they were working in it. I think the person said it was about a year later. They worked out the play for 2 years. They left the play a year after they left the company, got out of the play, and they are now working for an independent. They found a photocopy of the prospect and structure map in an old book that they had, and the question is it unethical to use this? So it's been a long time, and that. And the company, just catch in here, they were bought out by another competitor several years later, and none of these people are active in that basin, according to this little story here. So, interesting. Keep voting. I want to hear, I want to see what everybody thinks about this. Well, we're getting close to 50-50, but let's just start off with a couple of first round things, okay? So you found this photocopy of a structure map that you made from seismic data, okay? Well, the first thing, John, start smiling, I'm going to say it. The first thing is that structure map was made from seismic data. And was that seismic data licensed from a geophysical company? If it was, I think if you read in the fine print, don't you always have derivatives made therefrom? Okay, yeah, I'm having to look at John here because I know he knows these things, and I don't know them as well because it's been a while since I read it. But that does include maps, I believe. Or is that like special processing? I don't know. But I would be questioning whether you could run around with the map. Is there anybody? I see Steve over here shaking your head. What do you think, Steve? Okay, I'm going to repeat that. Steve is saying that if you had a photocopy of the seismic, you had it scanned and reprocessed it, that would be illegal. But if you used it of that seismic, that would be illegal in your presentation. But he says that if you just have a map and you have no seismic data to support that map, that actually, he doesn't think that's illegal. And of course, the other thing is that there's probably be a lot more seismic and data out there since that time, so the picture will change, so that map will change. It just gives you a hint. So here we go. What do you say?
Spec or own?
Well, that's where I'm going with it. You know, it really depends on where you are. A lot of times, if it's an onshore situation in a not prominent basin, it can be proprietary. Or if it's international, it's going to be proprietary, almost 90% of the time. But if it's in the U.S., a lot of it is going to be spec data, and that means you have a licensing agreement associated with it. And if it's been 15 or 20 years ago, you probably don't really remember whether it was licensed data or not, but so you do have that aspect going to it. Okay, well, that's good to know. So there we go. We have a little bit of guidance on that. But yes, I remember working at companies when I worked at Kerr-McGee, you know, and we were bought by Anadarko. Next question, I've been told. We had to do a secondary licensing agreement on data that Kerr-McGee had that Anadarko did not have.
I think there's enough variability, you should definitely read your license agreement.
Yes. All these license agreements are different. You need to read them. But here's another one here, same kind of general story here. But is it unethical to utilize this data, the photocopy, for the interpretation? And did this say the same one? No. Was it unethical to pursue your old prospect? The answer would be no. I don't think it's unethical to go out there and look at it because you know it's out there. But this is...
John?
Yeah.
The prospect, well,
But that base...
of that company. So.
But you know that gets, and that's a controversial spot on here on whether you're signing a non-complete clause. Okay, keep on going here. Let's vote on this one here. This is whether you're going to use any of the data. So everyone in here thinks that you can't use any of the data from that.
You need to, it depends on what the data is, because a lot of the data may be public source.
Right.
The answer is maybe.
Maybe, right. If it is public sourced, you'd be able to use it. If it's licensed seismic data, you can't use that. You can't use licensed seismic data. The maybes are coming in. Okay. All right, let's move on to the next question. It gets a little more interesting. Here they are. Would it be different if you generated the prospect 5 years ago? I think it would be. The closer you are to it, the more I get into the proprietary nature of it. But the question and problems you get into is that saying that if you change companies, you can't work in the Gulf Basin anymore? You know, you can't work offshore Green Canyon or Mississippi Canyon or Atwater Valley or whatever, Keithley Canyon. You can't work those anymore. Yes?
Another thing is, people hire you for what you've learned.
Mm-hmm.
Through this company. You cannot say you cannot work, like you say, the Gulf of Mexico, because you work in the Gulf of Mexico. That's what it comes down to.
Right. Okay, so here we are. Most people think that it is, that it would be different if it had been 5 years. So let's move on to the next question. Oh, wrong way. Case 8. Similar situation. This time you've only been there 10 years while employed. You spent 2 years playing unconventionals. You've established commercial fairways, recommended wells, did well site work. You know a lot about this play. You moved to another project. Your employer sold all of its asset and left the play a year later. 5 years after that, the company left the play. You retired. Now you've been hired as a consulting geologist by a small independent to work on this play. Rummaging through it, you find your technical presentation and fairway map showing the limits of commercial production at that time that you made to upper management 9 years ago while working for your former employer. Okay, would it be different if the company was working? I don't understand. I must have missed one of these. I think the first one is whether it's unethical or not to work on this. But this one is here. I jumped ahead somehow to that. But that's all right. We're going to run out of time in a minute. So, the question is, well, the first question was it unethical to work on this play? Okay, for that company. So then the second question was, would it be different if the old company was actively working the basin? In the first case, which I've lost one of the questions. I missed that somehow in there when I was working on this last night. It dropped out. The first question was supposed to be, is it unethical to work the play? And now this is the follow-up question, should have been question number 2. Would it be different if the old company was still working the play? So let's just go with this part of it here. We've already decided that it was ethical to work the play. Then the second question is it unethical if the new company was working it? Everybody seems 50-50. I mean, this still gets back into the same thing. Now, is that, you know, it's been a long time since you made that fairway map. It's probably going to be a little bit different than that. So that just gives you a hint of the direction to go. But I think that saying that you can't work a play that you've worked in the past when you go to a new employer is a bit restrictive. I hope everyone is in agreement with that. But there is a level of, you know, where did this data come from? And is the data from public sources or not, or proprietary sources? Let's move on. Oh, here, this one here. This one here, let's look at this. He's asking, is it ethical to use any of the presentation or commercial fairway map? Let's see what people say for that. We're down to about 5 minutes.
Is this a public presentation? Or is this on the-
No, it was a presentation they made to upper management 9 years ago.
Wait a minute. Are you saying, is it ethical or is it unethical?
Is it ethical? And everybody's saying no, it is not ethical to use this. And I would tend to agree. I don't think that you can go marching into your boss's office with those maps, with those things, and say, oh, this is a technical presentation I made to company XYZ when I was working this play, and here's a fairway map. But I think that you can know that information and it use it to guide you in what you're doing. But you can't go and show that to those guys because you were paid, and that's proprietary information, particularly that presentation you made of the company. It may not be up to date anymore, which buys you a little bit of space. No,
It's their property.
it is their property.
But if you redraw it based on your knowledge,
Well,
it's okay.
that's what usually happens in this situation, I've seen, is they sanitize the map. They got the map and they make it more broad brush, and there's no clean contours anymore. It's basically right, but it's sanitized.
Repeat that so we're the right person.
Yes, what it was said is that the person who said they've seen this before is that the people go in and they sanitize the map a great deal so that you can't really figure out where it came from or how it was derived, and it's more broad brush, but it's still, generally speaking, pretty darn accurate. Yes?
I think another area would be, you're speaking of an individual. We've seen companies like Shell lose charters of 10 interpreters to Unicom. That's where all this was.
Right.
Well,
And yet it was deemed legal.
Mm-hmm.
I believe the way that came down was because they were hired at will rather than by contract. The judgment was that there were not trade secrets involved because they were not contract employees of Shell.
Gotcha.
By their employment.
Right.
Was at will.
Mm-hmm.
And so conveying proprietary knowledge is indefensible, but trend knowledge is not.
Right, and these are the kind of things that is what led to, even at low-level employees, these non-compete clauses that are causing people who get laid off or lose their job or quit to not be able to work in their field anymore, which I think is unethical, flat out. You can't rob someone of their livelihood because they don't want to work for you anymore, or you decided you don't want them working for you anymore, and you made them sign a non-compete clause.
Which is why the state licensing grandfather, because you cannot restrict someone from pursuing their career.
Right, right. Now, I guess if you pay someone enough, because CEOs and upper management people, they have employment contracts, and I do think they have non-compete clauses in there. I don't know how they're written, but if you were to get one of those given to you, I would advise getting an attorney to read that so you don't get completely hosed in the picture. Yeah, that non-compete clause is a big piece of it. My daughter is telling me that we are wrapping up here rapidly. Okay, there we go. Oh, ooh. Other ethical issues to ponder. Here you go. We'll finish up with this. Your company needs a loan to avoid bankruptcy. Remember, the ends don't justify the means, so be honest about your resource calculation and accounting. There's another place where it can happen. Tell me about it. How much pressure have you guys in this room that worked in oil and gas had put on you to certify reserves that are up there that you don't feel comfortable with? Okay. In fact, one of the things that I was glad that we got into was the 1090, resource distribution. That way, I could put those outlandish numbers way up there on the P1, which meant it had no chance of happening. Here's another one. After your farm out presentation, the company asked for 55 seismic images to show their management. I don't know how many times I ended up calling you, John, asking you if I could have the company that's looking at our deal take 3 or 4 images, and you would tell me it was limited to 5 images, and we had to send a copy of them to you, so you knew which ones they were. Good job. Seismic is the lifeblood of this industry. Licensing needs to be known and followed. And I can't reemphasize it. In this room, if you're working in oil and gas, that's the place where the problems happen. I'm feeling a little bad for Trish. I did have one in here for one of these cases for environmental. Had to do with signing off on a report that you have not done, and that you read that didn't feel good about. We're running out of time because it's now been 1 hour. I wanted to have that one up, and I kind of skipped that when we jumped to the last questions. But I wanted you to know I do think. What? Here we are. It's the end. I don't know how Monica got that picture of the rainbow, but it's the end, guys. Congratulations. Jackie has certificates for everyone.